What's poppin' people? It's your boy Tradey Gravy. Welcome to the channel. And you're thinking about playing Warhammer. You're thinking about getting into the hobby, thinking about painting, thinking about having fun with your friends. Who knows? I've recently started that journey. And today I'm gonna show you what that first step looked like for me and where I started. This video is primarily going to cover the painting of my Plague Marine Kill Team. And along the way, I'm going to discuss a lot of things, from the set that I bought, why I bought it, what I was thinking when I was painting, what I learned during this process, and all sorts of different things. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. So now I have my minis primed and highlighted. Every tutorial I watched suggested to do a prime in black. I used the Chaos Black paint that you can buy at pretty much any hobby shop. And then I did a highlight. That way all of the small details will get pulled up and you can see them a lot easier, because as you can see on these minis, there are a ton of tiny details. I was a little intimidated at first, but I just figured I needed to start and then things would kind of work themselves out. So I started with a base layer, as you always do, and the highlights ended up not mattering because I didn't thin these paints very much, so I probably could have just skipped that altogether, but hey, I could still see the highlights, so it did make painting a little bit easier. But I also didn't buy the Citadel recommended paints. I purchased the Vallejo model paint set, and I just did a lot of mixing because there were a lot of non-specific colors in here, so I just had to rely on my eye to get the right color. So I tried to get the closest to the Plague Marine green that they used in the painting tutorial for the Plague Marines. You can actually look up a tutorial by Games Workshop that covers like how to paint them. So I tried to follow it to the photo that I saw in the box the best I could, but I wasn't super worried about getting it perfect. I just wanted it close enough. But I also replaced some colors that I thought didn't really make sense in my opinion. And I wanted to make them my own, so I just used my best judgment on what I think a Plague Marine might look like. I understand they're basically zombie Marines. Forgive me for not knowing the lore. I'll get there. I promise, I'll get there. One step at a time, but I wanted to get these painted up so I could start playing, get into the hobby. During this process, I treated it kind of like paint by numbers, or in this case, paint by equipment. So I would choose things and just try to pick them out one at a time and try to separate them, so to speak. That way it felt a little bit less daunting because there's just so many details on these figures. So I blacked out anything I thought was like metal or a weapon, and then I would get to that later. And oftentimes I'd get bored painting the same things, or if I thought I was done, I would just move on to something different. In this case, I moved on to the faces and the aliens. So I tried to go for like a weird grayish fleshy color for the face. And then I just went with purple for the aliens. I wasn't quite sure if I was gonna stay with purple or just use that as kind of like an undercoat for a different color, just to kind of give it that depth. But I just was kind of winging it. And then I also painted these little creatures, these little yellow worm things. And I just took my time with it. Went one step at a time. Painted this guy who had a bunch of like boils on him. And the paint I was using here it just felt too thin, and I felt like I was doing way too many coats. And I ended up changing that a little bit later. And then had to move on to the armor, of course, which I didn't have the color that matched very well. I had this gold, but I wanted more of like a brass. I needed something more orangey, I felt, because I knew these guys were green. I felt green and like maybe a darker orange would go better together. And also this gold is what I used for the Space Marines, so I needed something a little bit more dead. And I was hoping that the wash I would use later on was gonna really bring out a lot of those colors, which you'll see how well that went. And I do want to talk about the entry costs a little bit, because of course, as someone who might be interested in getting into this hobby, or just trying it out like I wanted to do, you want to kind of know the cost. And also, this is more of an exercise to show what not to do, because I definitely spent way too much money. And if I didn't spend too much money, I could have at least spent less money in hindsight. So what I purchased for this, I got the Chaos Black Primer for $23. I got the Vallejo paints for $45. The Kolinsky Sable brushes for $28. I bought a dry brush set for $6 by Pandafly. And I also bought a wet palette for I think about $20, which I got from Michaels. And then lastly, I also bought Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade, which are the wash paints that you'll see at the end of the video, which are about $7 each, so that's another $14 for those, which is a total of $136 for paint supplies. That's not including the box set, which is about $95. So total cost is about $231. And I tell you all this because you absolutely don't need to spend this much money. I spent way too much money, so don't be me. I purchased an airbrush, I purchased the paint supplies, and I still had to buy the kit and all that. When realistically, you really only need a few good brushes, not even good brushes at that, I'd say, to start. Some dry brushes I'd recommend, and then one paint set, one good paint set, because you can always mix paints and get a range of colors. My best suggestion for better and more directed advice, I would watch Squidmar Miniatures. I watched a ton of their videos. First off, they're amazing painters, and second off, they give a lot of really good advice to beginners on how to save money, what products to buy, and all sorts of things like this. Most importantly, painting techniques, and that covers beginner to even advanced painters. So they're kind of a one-stop shop for everything painting, and I'd 100% recommend checking them out because that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from. But yeah, Squidmar, hit me up. All right, and during me talking about cost, I had painted all of the little alien guys, which I was actually intimidated by at first, and I was pretty happy with how they came out by the end of it. I did decide to do the base layer in purple, and then I did pink over the top, so that way if I did miss anything, the purple would kind of be like a shadow. And here, I figured out how to do a rust effect, where I just put a silver coat down, and then I did brown for like dirt or aged rust, and then I patted it with orange to kind of brighten it up and create more of like a fresh rust effect. And I was happy about that. That gave me a second win and got me excited about finishing these, because I was starting to feel like it was never going to end because I spent so much time on these. And I'm definitely looking forward to working on improving my paint time because I feel like I could have done these in far less time. I probably spent about 40 hours total on the two armies. I think I spent probably 10 to 15 hours on the Space Marines and maybe between 20 and 30 on the Plague Marines. When I was doing this, I did feel like the Plague Marines were maybe a little bit too detailed considering this was a starter kit. And if you're like me and you want your army to look good for the immersion of actually playing the game, then you might be a little intimidated to get into the hobby because you feel like you're just going to spend an enormous time painting, which of course is the reality of this hobby from what I've seen. But I think if your goal is to introduce people to the game, maybe make both teams a little bit more simplistic so they can get a taste of the painting aspect and then get right into the playing aspect. But that's just my opinion. I mean, realistically, you don't need to paint them to play the game, but if you want that immersion, then you're going to have to. And I just figured, hey, maybe both teams should be just a little bit more simple looking. The Space Marines are perfect, but the Plague Marines, again, I just felt like there was a lot of really fine detail for a starter kit. Not to mention you also had all of the little alien figures, so realistically you're painting like a bunch more minis than just the Plague Marines. But let me know what you think. Drop a comment. Let me know if I'm looking at this the wrong way, but that just food for thought. Overall, I definitely recommend getting the Kill Team Starter set if you're interested in getting into Warhammer and you also don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of money to get into it, because it does get expensive. It can be a very expensive hobby. There's ways to make it cheaper, of course. But this set comes with everything that you need. It comes with the rulebook, it comes with terrain, it comes with 2 teams, and then it comes with the character sheets for each team outlining their moveset. One side note, there is a different rulebook, which is the core rulebook, which does outline the rules of the whole Kill Team game. But the one that comes with the set is more than enough to get you started and comes with scenarios to walk through combat and movement and things. And now we're going to get back to the painting process, and this was the best part, honestly. Leading up to this point, I was really unsure of how the minis were going to look. And for any beginner painters watching this process is probably the most important, in my opinion, out of my experience, because I wasn't really happy with my Space Marines or the Plague Marines up until this point of the painting. The Nuln Oil and the Agrax Earthshade, or whatever oil wash you're using at the end of your painting, is really going to tie the whole thing together. Quite literally a world of difference, because my Space Marines went from looking really flat to looking complete. So it's just made me feel a lot better. But it's not until you get to this point, in my opinion, that you're going to be like, oh wow, I'm really happy with the painting here. I did have one gripe with the Agrax Earthshade personally, and this is obviously I just didn't use it. I didn't realize how much pigment it would put onto the minis themselves. But my ultimate goal for the Plague Marines was to make them look gross, because they're zombies, they're plagued, they're supposed to be disgusting. So I'm not necessarily unhappy with the result, it's just that it could have been better. I layered it on a little bit too thick. With the Nuln Oil, I felt like I could have put as much as I wanted and it would have made a difference, but with the Earth Shade, especially on some of the colors I put it over, I felt like it could have been better. But here's the end result. These are my Space Marines. I thought they came out pretty decent for a first try. Ultimately, you can always add more dimension to maybe like the pouches and stuff. I just did like one flat brown color. I didn't do much for trying to change the light, but the Nuln Oil really brought out a lot of dimension in them. I did miss some spots in hindsight, but I thought it was good overall, decent for a first try. But excited to develop more, because ultimately I really want my minis to look epic. And once you watch enough videos of expert painters, it just seems like you just want to get there. But here are the finished Plague Marines. And as you can see, they do look disgusting. With the Agrax Earthshade, on some parts, like for example, like when you get to the wizard part, it didn't look that great, I thought, in my opinion. Like I should have used the black, the Nuln Oil, over the blue. But it's not the end of the world. I think they still look pretty decent and disgusting, as they should. The Agrax went pretty well over the pink, I thought, because they look really grimy and nasty. Some more than others, but I think these are just skills that you just need to develop with time, and you'll improve as time goes on. But looking forward to doing my next kill team, so hope to see you in the next one.
And that is it for the video, my friends. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button, of course. Drop a comment. Let me know how I did, if there's any different techniques I should use, any different colors maybe, anything you've learned along your way that could help me or anyone else that sees this video in improving their paint game. But overall review, thought Warhammer was pretty cool. Maybe I'll get into it more, maybe I won't, I don't know. But until then, I guess I'll just figure out if I'm going to or not. So I'll see you in the next one.